After hosting Christmas dinner for 18 people, I sat down with my wine. My sister-in-law looked me dead in the face and said, "Thanks for playing house. Your husband's been sleeping in mine." I looked at my husband, who didn't blink. Just said, "It's complicated." I nodded, and as everyone opened gifts, mine was already on its way to her office, with pictures. I've always been the one who holds things together. I was raised to. My mom was the kind of woman who vacuumed in pearls. We weren't rich. She just believed in presentation. My dad was cold, distant. Nothing was ever enough. So, I learned early on that the only way to feel safe was to make everything look good from the outside. Smile.
Cook. Clean.
Host. Be the glue. That's probably why I ended up with him. Let's call him Drew. Drew was easy to be with in the beginning. He was warm and funny. Everyone loved him. I met him when I was 23 and working at a bookstore. He came in every Saturday to get coffee and sit in the philosophy section pretending to read. I found out later he wasn't reading anything, just waiting for me to talk to him. It felt romantic at the time. We got married when I was 26. He worked in software. I did event planning before I had kids, then stayed home when our daughter was born. We had another 3 years later. I loved being home with them, but I lost parts of myself too. He never told me to stop working. He just said, "Whatever makes you happy." But he never noticed when I wasn't. His family is loud. Not cruel, just the type that likes drama. They interrupt each other, overshare, fight over holidays. His brother, Caleb, cheated on his wife, Sierra, about 2 years ago. It was messy. He moved out. She stayed, raising their boys. She came to me often crying. Said, I was the only person who listened. I felt bad for her. I made her dinner sometimes, invited her on family trips so the boys could still feel connected. That was the stupidest thing I ever did. They started sleeping together sometime around last summer.
July, I think.
I only figured it out in November. It was stupid. He left his iPad on the couch. He asked me to check the weather for him. That's all I did. I clicked it open, and her name was right there at the top of the screen. Next time, bring wine. I don't know how long I sat staring at it. I kept thinking, maybe it was a joke. Maybe it was innocent. But it wasn't. I opened the thread and started scrolling. Then I started shaking. They joked about me. They called me Mommy Dearest. She said I reminded her of a robot from a 1950s kitchen commercial. He said he felt trapped in perfection. Said I made everything look pretty but feel cold. She called me a suburban snow globe. He laughed at that. That hurt more than the sex, honestly. But I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I saved everything. Screenshots. Messages.
Dates. Times.
Photos. Even the one where she took a mirror selfie of herself in a hotel robe, his shirt clearly on the chair behind her. I copied it all onto a flash drive and hid it in my sewing kit. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet. I just knew I couldn't stay quiet forever. Then Christmas came, and I decided. We always host. I never mind. It gives me purpose. I like making things beautiful. This year I went all out. Set the table days in advance. Made place cards. Cooked everything from scratch. 18 people came. His family, mine, a few neighbors. Sierra was invited too, of course. Because I had to keep up appearances. I wanted to see how far she'd go. How smug she'd look.
Turns out very.
She dressed like it was a cocktail party. Heeled boots, low-cut red dress, full face of makeup. She brought a bottle of wine with a gold ribbon and handed it to me like we were best friends. She laughed a lot. Flirted with my husband in front of everyone, but subtly, touching his arm, asking him to open jars, that kind of thing. I saw it all. So did others. But no one said a word. Dinner came and went. I stayed busy. When everyone was finishing dessert, I finally poured myself a proper glass of wine and sat down. That's when she did it. She leaned in across the table, smiled wide, and said loud enough for half the table to hear, "Thanks for playing house. Your husband's been sleeping in mine." Someone gasped. I think it was my sister. Someone else dropped a fork. My father-in-law cleared his throat. I looked at Drew.
He didn't even look at me.
Just said flatly, "It's complicated." That was it. No shock. No guilt. He looked like he'd been waiting for this moment. I didn't cry.
I didn't yell.
I didn't leave the room. I didn't even finish my wine. I just nodded. Because what they didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that I had already sent Sierra's Christmas present. 2 days before. Overnight delivery. Mailed to her office. Marked confidential so her assistant wouldn't open it. Inside, a flash drive with all the screenshots, a timeline of every time they met, copies of texts from my husband to 2 other women, not her, a cabin reservation under a fake name he used, and a short, typed note that said, "You thought he was yours. He never was. Good luck explaining this to your boss." See, what I haven't said yet is that Sierra works at a law firm. Very strict rules. Her boss? Old school. Hates office scandals. Her job is the only thing she brags about more than my husband. She thought she was above me. She thought she had something to hold over me. What she didn't know was that I was already watching everything burn. When she said those words to me at Christmas dinner, she thought she won. She didn't even know the match had already been lit. The day after Christmas, everything was quiet. No texts from Sierra. Nothing from Drew. No calls. Just quiet. I woke up early, made the kids pancakes, and cleaned up the wrapping paper that no one else bothered to touch. Drew didn't come downstairs until almost noon. He acted normal. Like nothing happened. Like his mistress hadn't just outed him in front of our entire family. I handed him a mug of coffee and said nothing. He took it, sat down, and scrolled his phone. It was eerie how normal he tried to be. I knew he was waiting for me to yell, cry, explode. But I didn't. I just made eggs, wiped the counters, and kept moving. Later that day, I got a call from my sister. She asked me what the hell happened. I said, "It's being handled." That's all. She didn't push. The second day, Sierra didn't show up to work. A friend of mine, Claire, works at a different firm in the same building. I didn't ask her to spy, but she texted me anyway. "Something's going down at Sierra's office." She didn't come in, but her boss was slamming doors. I just wrote back, "Thanks." That afternoon, Drew finally cracked. He came into the bedroom while I was folding laundry and stood there in the doorway. "I didn't want it to come out like that," he said. I nodded, still folding. "She's going through a lot," he added. I stopped folding, looked at him. He couldn't even meet my eyes. That night, he slept in the guest room. I didn't ask him to. He just quietly took his pillow and walked down the hall. I locked the bedroom door behind him. On the third day, I got an email from an address I didn't know. It was her boss. One sentence. "Thank you for the information. She will not be returning to this office." No greeting. No signature. Just that. I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. I expected her to come by. Or to call. Or at least to try and fight back. But she didn't. Not at first. The twist came a week later. My brother-in-law, Caleb, called me. I hadn't spoken to him in over a year. Not since he cheated and moved out. He said, "I heard what happened. I think you should know she was still sleeping with me too. Up until September." I sat down. "You're not the only one she was lying to," he said. "Drew thought he stole her. She was just playing all of us." Turns out, Sierra never stopped sleeping with her ex. Not even when she was with Drew. She had been stringing them both along. Maybe more. She hated being alone, Caleb said. She told me she liked the power. I asked him why he was telling me this. "She was bragging to a mutual friend about how she humiliated you," he said. "I figured you should know she was never loyal to anyone." I hung up. I didn't say much. But something shifted after that. I had been so focused on them, on their betrayal, on getting back at her, that I hadn't let myself think clearly about what he had done. That he wasn't just a victim of her lies. He was part of it. Willingly. Repeatedly. He hadn't just slipped up. He built a life on top of mine, and smiled through it. Now I started seeing it everywhere. Little things. Missed birthdays. The way he would forget to introduce me at events. How he'd compliment my cooking but never thank me. how he'd roll his eyes if I talked too long about the kids. I started realizing he hadn't loved me in years. Maybe ever. Maybe he just needed someone to look good next to. The problem was I had built everything around him. My house. My routines. My whole image. I didn't have a career anymore. I'd been home with the kids for 8 years. He made all the money. He handled the accounts. And now I knew I couldn't stay. So I started digging. I went through every bank statement, every shared email. I made copies of everything. I found out he'd opened a new account 2 months ago. He had been slowly moving money into it. Not huge amounts, but enough to notice. I checked the balance. $24,000. He was planning to leave. Or at least preparing for it. Probably with her. Or maybe without either of us. But now that she was gone, maybe he was stuck. One night, I stood in the garage with my arms crossed and watched him load laundry into the washer. "I know about the account," I said. He froze. "I know what you moved. I know where it is." He didn't deny it. Just sat down on the concrete floor and put his head in his hands. I didn't feel sorry for him. I went back inside, locked the door, and started writing a list of lawyers. The lawyer I picked was a woman named Andrea. Mid-50s. Sharp. Quiet. The kind of person who watches before speaking. I met with her in mid-January. Told her everything. Showed her the account transfers, the photos, the texts, even the letter from Sierra's boss. She looked through everything and said, "You've already done the hard part." I asked her what my chances were if I filed for divorce. She looked at me over her glasses. "You've been out of the workforce for nearly a decade. You raised his kids. You managed the home. You have proof of infidelity and financial misconduct. He's the one who should be worried." We filed a few weeks later. Quietly.
He didn't know yet.
I waited until the paperwork was in motion before I told him. I didn't even say it to his face. I left the papers on his pillow. I went to stay with my sister for the weekend with the kids. I thought that would be the biggest twist. It wasn't. The real one came in February. Sierra showed up at my door. She looked different. Makeup gone. Hair tied back. A plastic grocery bag in her hand. Inside were a few crumpled documents and a single USB drive. I didn't want to let her in, but I did. She stood in the foyer and stared at the floor. Then she said, "I didn't come to apologize." I didn't speak. She said, "I came to give you this," and held up the USB. I asked what was on it. She said, "Proof he's worse than either of us thought." I took it. She left. I waited until the kids were asleep before plugging it in. It was a copy of files from Drew's old phone. Apparently, he'd backed it up once to her laptop and forgot about it. There were photos. Not just of her. Others. One looked barely legal. I couldn't be sure, but my stomach turned. There were emails. To someone he'd been paying. A woman. There were dates and amounts. Bank transfers. A Venmo history. He had been paying for sex for at least 3 years. Maybe longer. He even had one saved contact with a fake name. Tony. But it wasn't Tony. It was a woman in another state. There were flight confirmations. That was the part that broke something in me. It wasn't about Sierra. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a whole second life. Built in shadows. I called Andrea the next morning and handed everything over. She took one look and said, "We're changing the approach." Now it wasn't just divorce. Now it was leverage. Another twist. I also found out the house was in both our names. But the down payment came entirely from an inheritance I got after my grandfather passed. I had never pushed on that before. He always said it was our house. Now I knew I could push back. Andrea said we could argue for full physical custody and 70/30ths asset division. Maybe more if he didn't want the details getting out. I didn't even need to threaten to leak anything. I knew him well enough to know. Image was everything. But it didn't stop there. Late February, my daughter, she's 9, came into my room holding her tablet. "Mom," she said, "why is Dad texting a woman he says he doesn't like?" I froze. He had used our daughter's iPad once to message someone, not realizing the messages were still connected. It was a new woman. A coworker. He was already starting over. It never ended with him. He didn't know how to be alone. That's when I made my next move. I started printing everything. Every photo, every email, every receipt, and I started mailing things. Not to his office, he worked remote anyway. I mailed them to his parents, his siblings. One envelope to each, plain manila, with no return address. No note. No explanation. Just copies of everything. Let them sit with it. Let them look at me next Thanksgiving and remember what they read. Let them wonder how many times they smiled at him while he lied. I didn't care about what they thought of me anymore. I just wanted them to see him, really see him. The family that sat at my table while his mistress smirked in my kitchen deserved to know what he really was. The fallout started slowly. 3 days after I mailed the envelopes, Drew's mom called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry. I thought he grew out of it. She didn't say anything else. She didn't defend him. That silence said more than an apology ever could. His older sister, Leanne, sent a text. Just one line. You deserved better. I should have said something years ago. That stopped me. Years ago? I replied. What did you know? She called me immediately. I saw him with someone once. Years back. At a hotel. I was there for work. He didn't see me. I didn't say anything, because I didn't have proof. And I figured maybe it was a mistake. Or maybe you knew. I felt sick. So many people had seen pieces of it. And no one ever told me. Everyone had stayed quiet, like I was a child who needed protecting from the truth. Except Sierra. Sierra had thrown it in my face. But she'd also given me the last pieces I needed to burn everything down. The divorce got uglier. Drew stopped pretending after he got served. He got a lawyer and tried to fight custody. Said I was emotionally unstable. That I'd poisoned the kids against him. He submitted a character reference. One of his drinking buddies wrote it. Andrea didn't flinch. She brought out the receipts. She showed the judge the private bank account, the wire transfers, the Venmo messages. She hinted at the escorts without using the word. She didn't have to. The paper trail told the whole story. He tried to act like the victim. Said I was punishing him for a mistake. She looked him dead in the eye and said, Sir, this wasn't a mistake. This was a lifestyle. The judge didn't say much. Just nodded, took notes, and asked a few questions. We didn't get a decision that day. But I could tell. I could feel the shift. And then another twist came from a direction I never expected.
Caleb.
Drew's brother. He reached out again. Asked if we could meet. I was hesitant. I said I didn't trust either of them. He said, That's fair. But this is about your kids. We met at a park. Neutral place. No one else around. He handed me a folder. Inside were emails between Drew and a man I didn't know. There were discussions about moving money.
Offshore.
Banking apps. Crypto accounts. And there was one email, only one that mentioned the kids. It was vague, but enough. It said, if she tries to take them, we'll make her look unfit. She won't see it coming. I sat on the bench and stared at the page for a long time. He had been planning it. Way before I found out. Long before Sierra ever told me. He was already thinking of how to break me apart and still come out clean. Caleb said he found the emails on an old shared cloud storage account they'd used for a project years back. He said Drew must have forgotten to unlink it. Or maybe just got lazy. I asked why he was helping. He said, because he did it to me too.
Lied.
Used me. Tried to wreck my life, just like he did yours. I don't owe him silence. I gave everything to Andrea. She didn't say anything at first. Just flipped through it page by page, lips pressed tight. Then she said, this just changed everything. Now, we had financial fraud, hidden assets, written intent to sabotage custody. She filed a motion that week. Emergency order. Freezing accounts. Restricting access. Drew showed up at the house 2 days later, banging on the door. I didn't open it. Just watched from the upstairs window while he yelled outside. Eventually, he left. That night, I got an email from him. Subject: we can fix this. Message: you're making it worse than it has to be. You don't have to do this. I didn't respond. I just forwarded it to Andrea. Then I started packing the house. Not because I was leaving, but because soon he would be. And I wanted him to know what it felt like to be erased. The court date came in March. It was cold and rainy. I remember because I stood in the parking lot for a long time before going in. Just breathing. Just watching my own breath fog up in the air, wondering how I got here. Drew looked thinner than usual, like someone who hadn't been sleeping. His lawyer looked bored. Andrea walked in like she'd done it 100 times. Because she had. She handed me the final printouts. Labeled. Highlighted. Indexed.
We didn't speak.
The hearing started slow. Legal talk. Process. Then they went into the finances. His lawyer tried to argue that I was financially dependent and had no experience with real income. Andrea smiled, then pulled out the spreadsheet I'd built showing how I'd managed our budget for 8 years straight. Every bill, every payment, every savings plan. My name was on everything. Then came the hidden account, the crypto, the false transfers, the cash withdrawals. He denied knowing about them. Andrea slid the emails forward. The judge read them slowly. Then came the emails about the kids. The judge's face changed. I watched Drew realize in real time that this wasn't going to end in a lecture and a slap on the wrist. His knees started bouncing. He leaned forward like he was going to interrupt. His lawyer put a hand on his arm and shook his head. He knew. It was over. By the end of the day, the judge issued a temporary order. I got full physical custody. He got supervised visitation. He had 30 days to turn over all hidden accounts. He was barred from coming within 100 feet of the house without written permission. I kept the house. I kept the car. I got spousal support for 7 years. I got 70% of the assets. The judge said, your actions showed not only deceit, but deliberate planning to harm your spouse and avoid your responsibilities. You've lost the benefit of the doubt. Drew looked stunned. Not angry. Just blank. The kind of face someone wears when they finally realize they're not the smartest person in the room. He was ordered to leave the house by the end of the week. That Friday, I watched him pack. He didn't say anything. Just walked from room to room like a guest in his own life. When he reached the doorway, he paused. I didn't think it would end like this, he said. I said, I know. You thought I'd never fight back. He left without another word. But I wasn't done yet. Sierra had gone quiet since the office fallout. I assumed she'd lost her job. Maybe moved. I didn't care. Until I got a call in April. Blocked number. It was her. She said, he showed up at my apartment last week. Said you ruined his life. I didn't respond. She said, he told me you were going to leak everything. That you'd destroy me too. I stayed quiet. Then she said, I lost my job. I lost my reputation. But I deserve that. He didn't just cheat on you. He lied to everyone. I finally said, why are you calling me? She paused. Then said, I wanted to say, I know you think I won. But I didn't. You did. I hung up. I didn't need her guilt. A week later, I followed through on one last thing. Something I'd held back. Just in case. I emailed an anonymous tip to the Internal Revenue Service with copies of the crypto transactions, unreported income, offshore transfers. Let the government ask their own questions. He thought I was soft, that because I smiled and baked and held my tongue, I'd fold. He forgot that quiet women are the ones you should fear most. Because we don't explode. We dismantle, piece by piece. And we don't leave ashes. We leave nothing.